Welcome everyone to this session. Thanks, Pakistan Dreaming, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Uh, and I'm glad to be here to be speaking in the first session, essentially. Hope you're all having a good day so far. Yeah, my topic, as Munib mentioned, is building your own custom predictions using Einstein Prediction Builder. And I don't need to probably reintroduce myself, considering Muni has already done that for me. So yeah, thanks a lot again. Before we move on to the topic itself, let's do the one of the most important part of the presentation, which is forward-looking statements. Because forward-looking statements are inherently subject to risks and uncertainty, remind us that you should make any purchasing decisions or investments decisions based on products that are currently commercially available. So moving on to the most exciting part, which is the presentation outline itself. So we'll do a quick introduction around what is Salesforce Einstein, what is Einstein Prediction Builder. We'll deeply dive into how to build your own custom predictions. We'll do a demo as well, uh, followed by some consideration and best practices, and then some additional resources, essentially, that might help you if you want to, if you're new to Einstein or if you're new to Einstein Prediction Builder, or just want to kind of continue your journey. Uh, so let's move on to the next slide. So what is Salesforce Einstein? CRM has become massively data-led in the last few years. Data-based insights are a critical component of strategic decision making. But transforming data into actionable insights can be challenging, right? We've all kind of seen that over the period. And this brings the role of predictive analysis to the forefront, right? So what is Salesforce Einstein? Einstein is an application that uses AI. It gives sales, service, marketing a complete and up-to-date view of customers and sales prospects, also driven by AI. It makes Salesforce smarter. It is built on robust and flexible Salesforce security architecture. Uh, so it discovers hidden insights and patterns your data, right? What I mean by that is it for example, in order to understand what trends are driving your business or what marketing campaigns are performing, right? So that helps in the discovery phase. And if uh, yeah moving on to the next point, it's predicting about the outcomes for every function in industry. One of the examples being, to predict the number of next quarter. Uh, it recommends the best action, offer, or engagement. For example, the actions you should take to prevent your customers from leaving your company. So, like, yeah, those kind of things, as in, like, it provides a recommendation. And lastly, automation. When customers think about AI, they think about automation, right? So, having said that, you can't automate everything. There are restrictions to that, but think about a repetitive path, uh, which is what you can automate using AI and Einstein. Uh, we build AI-powered assistants and apps by leveraging Einstein bots, Einstein voice, Einstein vision, Einstein language, uh, and that we use. Which brings me down to the most important point about Salesforce Einstein itself. It provides a full spectrum of AI with descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive capabilities. When I say descriptive, it means essentially what happened and why. Uh, Predictive is more about what's going to happen, uh, and prescriptive is what should I do about it. So in this particular session, we'll be emphasizing more on the predictive side of things, which is what Einstein Prediction Builder operates on. So what is Einstein Prediction Builder? Um Einstein Prediction Builder, it allows admins to create custom predictions on standard or custom objects in Salesforce with clicks, no code involved, and it uses a simple wizard, which we'll see in a minute once we get on the demo stage itself. Uh, so yeah, it is essentially, like I said, it's point, click, and predict. No code required. Um, sorry, no need for any tedious tasks of ETLing the data. Predictions can be made based on the data given and continue to score as your data set changes. It learns from examples in the past to make predictions. Uh, and it uses projections to help you work smarter by focusing your time on the right tasks. It predicts the answers to binary questions, yes or no, or numerical questions. Uh, but the overall gist or the overall summary of Einstein, or the way you should be focusing, is like focus on specific high priority business outcome. What do you want to achieve out of this? Or what do you want to predict on? Is there a problem that your company is facing? So I think these are one of the points that you need to think about as well. Uh, Having said that, predictions can be made based on the data given and continue to score as your data set changes. Let's also quickly cover the prediction terminologies. Uh, so when using Einstein prediction, it's helpful to understand some terms we use for sets of data, right? So one of the first step in building a prediction is to select the object that contains the field you're predicting. The set of records on that object is your overall data set. For example, you want to predict your prospect's likelihood to attend an event. So your prediction is based on the lead object in that case. So let's say you have 600 leads, and that is essentially your data set. So after selecting an object, you have the option, and it's not a required step, but you have the option to focus your prediction on a segment of your data. You can use, again, conditional logic to filter your data set, which creates a subset of the data. For example, you're interested in only your leads from non-banking industries. Your segment has 501 leads, right? In that case, so yeah, essentially it's a subset of data set. Then you tell which records in your segment or in your whole data set, if you are not focusing on a segment, to use as examples for building a prediction, right? So this is your example set. Einstein identifies patterns in data from these records to create predictions for the records. Your example set must include leads who have and haven't attended a previous event. So you set up your conditions to include only leads that are being worked on. Using working leads rather than new leads makes your example set more likely to include a variety of values for prior event attendance. Uh, and lastly, but not least, the prediction set. These are essentially the set of records that Einstein predicts values for. Uh, Your prediction set consists of the records in your segment or data set if you don't have a segment. For or prediction scores for. The default selection is to score records that aren't in the example set, which in the case means new leads. As you build a prediction, you would always yeah, as you build a prediction, there is always a data checker as well, which we'll see in a minute in the demo that we have to make sure you have enough records in your segment, example set, prediction set, in order to build a prediction. So what are the steps to configure, right, in order to build your own custom predictions? Uh, so before you start building a prediction, take some time to think about what you want to predict and how it translates to Salesforce. In some cases, you might need to create a custom field to get your data in a format that Einstein can predict. Uh, but the most important bit is actually the planning, right? So when planning your prediction, you first decide what field you want to predict. How you set up your prediction depends on the data type of the field you are predicting, right? Uh, so decide what field and type of field you want to predict values for. So you want to predict values for numeric field, or whether you want to predict on a custom formula field or check boxes. Uh, get familiar with data sets, segments, example sets, and prediction sets, which we covered in the last slide. Uh, and then we kind of, once the planning is done, then we build the predictions. Einstein Prediction Builder guides you through all these steps. It's a very simple wizard that guides you through all these steps. So no coding required. And then it's more about previewing your prediction, right? So check the score, revisit it if required, and you can obviously optimize your predictions. Uh, yeah, so it's more about, like this whole phase is also, so build phase itself is broken down into 4 different steps, wherein you choose an object, you choose what to predict, you choose what information to use, uh, and then you just say the prediction. But I would say like the most important part over here is still the planning bit, which is the key for your prediction. So before we start building a prediction, again, like take some time to think about what you want to predict and how it translates to Salesforce objects and fields. In some cases, you might need to create a custom field to get your data in a format that Einstein can predict. Make sure you uh, focus on the specifics, high priority business outcomes. And I'm kind of repeating myself because that's really, really important, which we have seen, if you know, in one of the earlier slides as well. Uh, yeah, so you can predict on binary predictions. So you have like basically 2 kinds of predictions: binary predictions or numeric predictions. Binary predictions uh, is just leveraging the historical information to answer a yes or no question. And numerical ones are one which predicts a number, which could be like predicting your revenue, predicting your cost, tax, year-over-year growth. So all those kind of predictions, essentially. Examples of binary predictions are, the likelihood that a deal gets closed in next quarter, or the likelihood that year-over-year growth is greater than last year. Uh, choose and always kind of probably think about this statement over here, which is if you can track it, you can predict it. Uh, it's kind of that formula essentially. Uh, so choose a repeatable workflow that you can report to build your prediction. Take the time to identify that data, the data that will enable the best quality signal for your prediction. Right. So more data connected to Salesforce means more options with predictions, and better quality means better quality predictions. Better quality data means better quality predictions. Uh, Few examples of what to expect in terms of predictions, whether the next invoice will get paid or not, number of hours to close high priority cases, the likelihood of closing a deal, which I mentioned uh, as well. Uh, and having had those considerations, probably ask in terms of defining a use case. What is the problem my company is facing, or what type of prediction will help? Or can this prediction be phrased as a yes or no prediction? How do I measure if this prediction is successful? So I think these are some key points to be addressed while defining a use case as well. Uh, Having said that, let's quickly see if we can. Yeah, if we can quickly do a demo on predicting the likelihood of getting an invoice paid. What we'll do over here is uh, I've got a developer org. What I'm going to do over here is just create a new prediction. And in that prediction, we'll see how to essentially build a custom or custom predictions. So yeah, I'm predicting the likelihood of getting an invoice paid, and over here I'll probably put the name as late invoice prediction. Put it as demo because I'm sure I've created a few others which might just have the same API name. So in order to not have any conflicts, and this is what I was talking about is my segment. Sorry, my data set wherein I choose the object. In my case, it's invoice because that's what I'm predicting on. And then you can define a segment over here itself. The default selection is no segment, whereas we can focus on a segment of record. If you remember, the example that I said was about a lead uh, having certain status, right? So you can provide a field over here, provide what the exact condition you want as part of the segment to create a subset of data uh, out of your data set. In this particular problem, we are not going to create any segment. Um, and if you remember, I did briefly mention about checking data. So make sure you have enough data so that you can uh, have the example set and the prediction set, uh, for Einstein to predict on. So in this case, I have 2005 total records as invoices, and 400 is the minimum. So you need to have at least 400 records. The more, the better. Uh, Click on next, and then this part of the wizard is what asks about whether you want a numeric prediction or whether you want a binary prediction. Uh, I'm going to go with numeric with a binary prediction because my problem or the problem that I'm trying to predict over here is about the likelihood of getting an invoice paid. But again, you can also use numeric, right? And based on that, actually, Einstein uses different predictive model types as well. So we have a certain set of predictive model types. One is called random forest. The other one is called logistic regression, which again, like you don't need to worry about. It's something that Einstein uses to predict values. And then whichever kind of works better for your set of data is what Einstein eventually chooses uh, to predict. So yeah, the predictive model type that I was mentioning, random forest, logistic regression, these two are used for Boolean, whereas the numeric one is again has random forest, but the other one is linear regression. So if you see these ones being used, and again, I'll show you in a minute where you can actually see the predictive model type as well. But for you right now, yeah, you just choose whether you need a Boolean or a numeric. Having said that, we choose Boolean. Then we see whether there's a field that we can have our prediction based on. So when Einstein rolled out this feature, we didn't have any option for no field. So we had to like create a formula field, something which would then help in the prediction, wherein you could have your own conditions and everything else. So if you have certain conditions, you can have it away. In our case, there is none, so I'm going to go with no field. Uh, and then that's where we define our example sets and uh, like which all invoices would be late would be part of my yes examples, and which all invoices would be paid on time would be under the no example criteria, right? Um, so for this purpose, what I have is uh, let's create the filter criteria. Sorry. So payment date over here is actually last payment date. Payment date is earlier than like that in due date. Uh, I'm gonna add a few more criteria. Balance due is greater than 0, and invoice due date is earlier than current date time. Uh, and so what I'm trying to do here is the likelihood of my invoice getting late is that either the payment date is earlier than the invoice date. Sorry, payment date should be greater than the later than the invoice date. Invoice due date, or the balance due is greater than 0, and invoice due date was in the past. And the no criteria could be defined as balance, and the balance is actually 0, and payment date is less than or earlier than the invoice due date. So this is the criteria that I'm going to put to say that the payment was done in time and it wasn't late. So let's check data. So you need to choose the object or the reports that you want your data set to be checked for. So again, if you see over here, 400 is the minimum for an example set. We have 2003 records, which are being used for example sets. And 100 is minimum for yes, and 100 is minimum for no, right? And you can't have any intersection. So that means like our record count looks good. And we have only 2 records to predict because these are the 2 records that I just created this morning for us to make sure we have some records which can be used as part of prediction set. You can also define the prediction set over here. So by default, if you remember, I said that score only like Einstein scores the records that aren't in the example set. So that's the default option, but you have the option of choosing score records that are in the example set. So in that case, all these 2003 plus 2005 records would be sorry, probably just 2003 records would be scored. Or if you want just specific records to be scored, then you can have that option over here as well. Obviously, you need to define the criteria over here. But I'm going to go with the default option that we had, which is score only records that aren't in the example set. So click on next. The next screen then gives you all the fields that would help Einstein base your prediction on. So if you see any field, so by default, all the fields are selected, and that's what, and then which is what the option that I'm going to go with. But if certain fields are missing, or if you feel like this field balanced you is, or any of these fields isn't really contributing to the prediction, and maybe like making your prediction score worse, then you have the option to take those fields off as well. So you can exclude those ones. So I'm going to click on next, and this field, so over here, what you do is you create a field uh, which stores the prediction score uh, of your prediction itself, which I'll show you in a minute as well on how it stores the records and what's the meaning of that score. Uh, and then you can just choose whether you want the prediction results to display or not. So I'm going to put it as on, click on next. This is the page wherein you see a summary of all these settings that you have just done. Uh, Everything looks fine. You can do a final data check again. You can even run reports from here. You can, if you click on run report, it would open up the report builder, and then you can add fields, remove fields, add some criterias on those records as well. Finally, we build prediction. Usually it takes few minutes for Einstein to build prediction, but what I did meanwhile was I had this prediction built. So once you build the prediction, it would show up as ready for review. And once you've reviewed it, you can enable it. So I've had this prediction, which is already enabled. And what we are going to go is go through this particular that's it's the same prediction, same criterias. If you see over here, not here, sorry, under settings, if you see it's the same criteria, yes examples and no examples, the same set of data. But to provide a brief overview of this page, it gives you it helps you reviewing what the prediction quality is like. Uh, and we'll cover this bit in a few more details over here. But essentially, before like there's different criteria. In my case, my prediction is too high, and it's probably case of hindsight bias over here, which we'll know in a sec what it is, what it actually means. The the acceptable is more like if you have something from here until even create, as in like that set, that helps you, or that you can say like that's a good enough prediction for you to deploy into higher environments. But there are ways to change the scores. First, again, the more the data, the better it is. But then the other bits and pieces are think about whether you need certain fields or whether including certain fields is impacting your scores. And then that you could see over here itself. So what are the fields that are being or that are impacting your prediction, right? So balance U, late P, and it would range from 0 to 1, 1 being highest, 0 being the least. And once you click over there, you can see the scores essentially of different fields or different attributes having the impact on your prediction. Remember, I was also talking about the predictive model data type. So random forest being one of them, the other one being logistic regression. But then Salesforce just uses like checks which one is better for your data set and uses the model type depending on whichever works best. It obviously checks both the model type uh, with your set of data. Coming back to the prediction quality, uh, so for the data scientists over here, uh, this is a common metric area under the ROC curve, which is, if you see over there, that's what Einstein uses. It's again something that Einstein does behind the scenes. It's a common metric used to compare predictive performance of different models. Uh, Having said that, these are the stuffs which Einstein does behind the scenes. And there are more articles around it. So if you're interested, I would highly recommend going through those and understanding what happens or how the machine learning works for Einstein. Then, yeah, these are essentially like different fields and what they have an impact uh, on your prediction. And we'll quickly go through the prediction and see what the score looks like. Uh, so where, if you remember, we had only two data sets or two records in the data set that were supposed to be part of prediction set. Uh, and the others were part of the example set. So these are the two. And like if you see the score 68, 58, the higher the number, the more probability of the invoice getting paid. So in this case, this one has more probability than this one. Uh, right. And please feel free to ask your questions in the chat window. Going back to our slides. Some considerations and best practices. So considerations first. What Einstein does is it works with Einstein Prediction Builder. It works with all custom objects and some suppose limited standard objects. When I say limited standard objects, like accounts, contacts, cases, all these are supported. But maybe some objects like knowledge articles and few other objects are not supported. So make sure you review that list before implementing it or before proposing to implement it. Your data set needs to have enough records in order to build a successful prediction. And that is one of the key points. Uh, Einstein Prediction Builder can make predictions for the checkbox, especially constructed formula fields and numeric. So that's one of the points that is the core of prediction. Predictions created in production aren't copied to sandbox org. So that is one of the points that you should be aware of as well. Uh, Predictions can't be edited when in enabled or pending state. Predictions are packageable only in managed packages. So if you want to deploy it, that's the way to go. Beware of what's GA versus pilot beta features, because even in this presentation, some of the points that I was mentioning are actually beta or pilot features. So some licenses and limits we need to consider as well. The one that I was using was a developer edition org. So if you remember, I only had one enabled out of one, I guess. But you can have up to 10 predictions. So I was using a tri-Einstein version of Einstein Prediction Builder, wherein it lets me build up to 10 predictions and enable up to one of them at a time. Similarly, consider if you are implementing it for a customer, consider moving on to the paid version of Einstein Prediction Builder, which is again available with Einstein Predictions and Einstein Analytics Plus licenses. So these are the licenses that you need to have. And then it lets you build up to 20 predictions, enable up to 10 of them at a time. Einstein Analytics Plus license lets you build up to 45 predictions and 35 at a time. So they are way more relaxed in that case. You could have more and more predictions based on different attributes and based on different objects itself. Some other key points and more from the best practices point of view, I would say. First, notice whether the prediction quality title says, estimated or not. Because if I go back to my presentation over here, uh, uh, so so if you see, it says estimated, right? Distribution results estimated. So these are all estimated figures. So yeah, notice whether the prediction quality title says estimated or not. If so, it means that either you haven't enabled your prediction yet, or it's enabled but not yet running on live data, which is what it is in our case. Either way, the quality score is estimated based on a subset of your example data. So it's typical for the quality to go down after the prediction starts running on live data. For example, if your prediction quality is great but estimated, check the scorecard again in about a month to see how it's performing with live data because things could change depending on the data quality that we have as well. Uh, Make sure you collect more data. You know, Yeah, coming back to the presentation. Yeah, so make sure you collect more data. Certainly not all quality problems are due to the amount of data, but in some cases you can improve the quality simply by waiting until your data set is more full. Try changing the way your data is segmented. For example, make your segment includes only records that are relevant to your prediction. If you have two distinct data sets that would each benefit from having its own prediction, create a separate prediction for each segment. Make sure your example set contains the right records for both yes and no examples. Look for possible sources of bias in your data that might influence your prediction. Make sure you are not excluding any points that could prove additional or useful data. If your prediction uses formula, just make sure uh, make sure they are correct. Uh, if your prediction quality is too high when estimated, which was in our case, before it's running on live data, it's likely too good to be true. So review the fields included in your prediction. Do any of them, and probably think about, do any of them look wrong or contain data that couldn't have been known until after the event being predicted? If so, exclude those fields. And remember, I was talking about hindsight bias. This type of problem is essentially what's called hindsight bias. Uh, Also, look over the top predictors on the scorecard. Do they make sense? If any of them look wrong, consider excluding those fields. So there are obviously uh, different points that we should be taking into account to improve our predictions quality. Uh, Again, it's all about the data. Pick the right tool for the job. Start with end in mind. Embed predictions and actionable insights within Salesforce. Machine learning projects are different. So, in order to even plan those projects, make sure you have taken all the mitigation and then risks involved into considerations. Again, can't recommend enough. Use data checker while selecting on objects to predict. Uh, and Yeah, before we kind of finish our consideration and best practices part, just make sure you are aware about the beta and pilot programs. So one of the pilot programs that wasn't visible right now, but it was if we go 6 months back, was the scoring frequency. So right now, Einstein takes into account it does it every hour. The scoring frequency is kind of set to every hour, which is the default right now. But before it was, it gave an example, or it gave an option of selecting whether you want an hourly scoring frequency or whether you want record or when record changes. So think about all those things as well. Like, is it something that, and obviously when you're purchasing decisions, make sure you know the programs that are ongoing. Numeric field prediction, which I've been mentioning, is a beta feature as well. So isn't part of the services under your master subscription agreement with Salesforce. So yeah, with that point, there are some additional resources, and I can share the slides with you later on, uh, which which would essentially help you learn more and kind of progress with your Einstein Prediction Builder journey. Uh, any questions? Let me
Yes, we
have a look
have
at
two
the chat.
questions in the Q&A section.
Hmm, trying to have a look. So it says to review after 3 months or 6 months. So how you test this, how we decide your predictions are good, because predictions won't be always what we need, right? If you can suggest tips on review. Uh, in my opinion, it takes time. Again, like machine learning projects are way more different. So data is something that you need to rely heavily on. So again, like it's it's a very interesting question, but again, it a lot depends on the way machine learning projects work out as well, and it's not the same as a normal Salesforce implementation, I would say. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Anish, but yeah, it's a very important topic, and it's something that needs, I would say, like a lot of time to discuss as well. And that's what I mentioned in my considerations itself. Like it's a machine learning project. It's not the same. You need to have that. Uh, yeah, you need to do proper investigation around the data that you have as well. Cheyenne Afzal, is it right to assume that Einstein Prediction Builder follows supervised learning? Uh, I'm not sure if I get the meaning of supervised learning, but Einstein Prediction Builder learns from your data. It depends on your data set that you have included, uh, and obviously the predictive model type, or even yeah, the predictive model type. It uses like I mentioned, random forest, logistic regression, linear regression. These are something which Einstein Prediction Builder picks up based on the type of data that we have. So in that case, yes, we don't have control on those bits and pieces, and Salesforce does it for us. Uh, does that answer your questions? Believe so.
Okay, I think we should now move on to the raffle, if you suppose.
Okay, sorry, it was maybe breaking up for me. Uh, But if we don't have any further questions, then thanks everyone. Thanks Pakistan Dreaming, and thanks everyone attending this session as well. Uh, I hope you all have a great weekend ahead and a great day for sure, which I'm sure you all are having. Thank you.